And that leads to, and I'm curious what you think about this overall, the notion of to what extent is what Jesus knew, does that change then the Passover story? And it becomes now the Easter story, right? Talking about that idea of the Christian Seder is one of sort of taking the Passover story and sort of now applying it to Jesus, applying it to this new context. And therefore, it is the next iteration. It is the next stage of what this holiday is, right? There's no need for Passover now. It is now Easter.
I can't agree that Jesus also had the intent of a replacement theory of all of this now is superseded by the Easter event and, Jesus back in the fully divine, back in a fully divine form, right? Because that's also part of what distinguishes Jesus, the man,
Right.
and Jesus, the Christ. So like that is where I and again, this is my like personal interpretation of theology. I know there are lots of other beliefs and understandings around this. That's why the conversation has continued on for 2,000 years. If we all agreed the same thing, it wouldn't be this hard.
It would not be. No.
The same way that I made reference to seeing Jesus's ministry as a renewal movement, even Jesus knew what was going to happen, always believed himself and understood himself as the Son of God, Son of Man, fully divine, fully human. There's fulfillment of prophecy taking place here, but it was a fulfillment of prophecy, not a replacement. Because again, Jesus's intent, as I see it and understand it, was not to suddenly say the story of Moses and therefore Passover and everything that God did, as my dad put it. What did God do? That doesn't become irrelevant just because the Easter event takes place. And if you believe that Jesus is the fulfillment of a prophecy, all of that history still matters.
Right.
Because we also can't forget that part of the messianic vision of Jesus is the resurrection is like phase 1, right? Because then there is the second coming.
What is the next thing, right?
Right. What is the next thing? What is the like full restoration of creation back to the garden state, back to the perfect relationship with God, the new heaven and the new earth.
Right.
That is still in the future.
Well, which is, I think that I love the way that your dad referenced this notion of going back to the garden or getting to the garden as a way of expressing that sentiment of here is how we are trying to be able to recognize that there is to use your language, not a shift, but a fulfillment, right? A fulfillment of a prophecy that may not be seen as a prophecy to those who observe the Passover or observe the holiday as it is. Rather, it is, it's not the same thing for them, but the idea is for us to be able to return back to the garden where we were created, where we were all united. One of the other interesting things I think about Passover especially is that in addition to the history of here's 2 different holidays, the Passover and the Festival of Unleavened Bread, one of the most interesting stories about Passover is that even during the time of the temple, there were Jews who lived outside the land of Israel, particularly in Egypt, in a place called Elephantine. And in Elephantine, they actually had a temple, like a bona fide Jewish temple in Egypt. And you know what one of the questions was? Should we bring a Passover sacrifice to our temple in Egypt?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for all the reasons that you would think like you shouldn't do it, That's what they were asking. And you know what they were told? Don't bring it. Don't bring it, because of how it's going to be viewed as, in a certain sense. And you think about the story of Judaism, or not really Judaism as a religion, because it didn't exist as a religion back then, but the Israelite religion, the belief in the God of Israel. Believing God of Israel could be seen as a replacement of or fulfillment of the gods of Egypt, especially looking at the way in which many of the plagues, whether it was the blood going against the Nile, and the Nile was a place for life and for one god of Israel of Egypt to come out, to the plague of darkness, and how darkness was to be a blight against the god Ra, the sun, right? To the firstborn, the plague of the firstborn is against Pharaoh, who was considered to be like a god, right? So in all these ways, either God is saying all of those beliefs are now null and void and I replace them, and that's, I think, how we kind of view it, or that now I fulfilled this role that you have, the way in which you have understood it to be up until this time, I have now fulfilled it. But it comes out as a replacement that is viewed very negatively, and in a sense kind of in a hostile way, that now what came beforehand is no longer valid.
Right. And, you know, to be fair, that's a very human thing to do. Like, oh, I was doing something wrong. Rightness and wrongness, the value judgments, good, bad, you know, we do that quite frequently as a way of making meaning of things, is we have to put them on this dichotomous, it's not even a spectrum, it's just opposite poles.
Right.
And sometimes it's also a matter of, like, when something needs to be established, the boundaries have to be really, really firm and really rigid, because if it's too malleable, too permeable, then what change is actually occurring? What is the difference?
It's amazing we're talking about this in terms of the history of these two holidays and the relationship between Jews and Christians. It's another thing to see all of this come out live with us on the air, because I'm about to show you something that's going to, I think, bring this out in a whole new level. The first is this, and it is from one of our good friends who has been part of this work for a very long time and who continues to be so. It is none other than the always amazing Reverend Samantha Gonzalez Block, who wrote to us, "Grateful always for your heartfelt efforts to continue to support interfaith families everywhere." Heart emoji, prayer hands emoji, and what is that other emoji?
It's like a party horn.
Ooh, party time with the holidays. And Reverend Samantha Gonzalez Block is one of the spiritual leaders of the Interfaith Families Project, who, if you are in the DC area, please go and check them out. They are absolutely an incredible organization, do some amazing work for interfaith families overall. And Reverend Samantha Gonzalez Block is an interfaith kid herself. You will probably even hear from her later on during our episode here today, actually very shortly. So that's on one spectrum, right? You have these different traditions that, whether it's to succeed them, whether it's to replace them, to fulfill them, there's this relationship, the old and the new, how to make it work. We got a couple of comments from someone who we've never met before, but who was, who made a comment via YouTube, or via the YouTube channel. And it is a comment that actually, he has a few of them. I'm not sharing them all, but I'm sharing one of them because it actually speaks directly to the point that we are making about the human nature of, when you're looking for truth, maybe there's only one truth, or we think that there's only one truth out there, and it can be very challenging. In this case, we're actually talking about, he identifies as Muslim and has a certain view of Islam that is seemingly replacing Christianity and Judaism. This is what Armeni Safan says. Prophet Muhammad became a light for the Gentiles and a covenant for the people, as per Isaiah 42:6. don't they, Christians and Jews, see? Are they so much blind that they can't see the truth? And Armenia, I appreciate the fact that you're raising this, because the point that you're raising is actually the larger point that we're negotiating here when it comes to interfaithing. There are many folks from all religions who would believe, who would agree with you, not necessarily the point that you make, but that their religion, our religion, your religion, her religion, whatever religion you ascribe to, is the truth. And there can't be another way to look at it. However, the story of interfaithing is that there is a way to find a way to make it work. There is a way to be able to have multiple truths live together. And the fact is, and the reason why this work is so important, is because it's not universal. The point of human nature, especially when it comes to the story of Passover and Easter, as we're talking about, that happened so many years ago in regards to Jesus, the individual, and the way that he lived. That's still happening here today.
Mhm.
It's still here today. And that's one of the reasons why this work and your support for this kind of work is important. And so I will make a pitch for this right now, that if you believe that the work that we are doing here is something that is important to answer to the Armenians of the world, who believe that their view is the only view that can be truthful, and that if you don't see it, then what? Are you just blind? This is the kind of work, this is the kind of support that is important for us to be able to show that there are so many folks who see the value in being able to hold up these truths together, which is something that Anna, your dad, said. So I just wanted to be able to share that, because that just came in live.